There is a woman's mind drifting through interstellar space right now. Not a recording of her voice, not a photograph of her face. The actual electrical activity of her brain, captured in a single hour on Earth almost 50 years ago, squeezed down to about a minute, and pressed into a disk of gold that is now traveling more than 15 billion miles from the planet where she sat and thought those thoughts. And the strange, almost unbearable part is what she was thinking about while the machine recorded her. She was thinking about being in love. Her name is Andrew Yen, and her brainwaves are bolted to the side of the Voyager spacecraft, sealed in a record built to last 1 billion years. To understand how a single human being's private thoughts ended up as humanity's message to the stars, you have to understand what that record actually is and the almost absurd circumstances under which it was made. Because the golden record is the most ambitious thing our species has ever tried to say. And we set it in 6 weeks, on a budget of $1,500, while half the people involved were quietly falling apart or falling in love. Let's start with the impossible assignment. In the months before the Voyagers launched, a small group of people were handed a question that has no correct answer. If these two machines are going to drift through the galaxy for longer than human civilization has existed, and if there's even the faintest chance that someone, someday, finds one of them, what should we put on board? Not data, not science. A message, from all of us, to whoever is out there, speaking for the entire human race. And you have about a month and a half to decide. The man they put in charge was Carl Sagan. Around him, he gathered a tiny team, most of them young, none of them sure it would work. Frank Drake, the astronomer who had spent his life thinking about how to talk to other civilizations, handled the technical side. The question of how you encode anything at all onto a record that an alien has never seen and has no idea how to play. A young writer named Timothy Ferris produced it. An artist named John Lomberg gathered the images. Sagan's wife at the time, Linda Salzman Sagan, organized the spoken greetings. And a writer and producer named Andrew Yen was made the creative director, responsible for one of the hardest pieces of all, choosing the sounds, deciding what Earth itself should sound like to a stranger. The way they worked was almost unimaginably informal for something now bolted to the most distant objects humanity has ever made. They held listening sessions at Sagan's house in Ithaca and Ferris's place in New York, where people would simply show up with records and ideas and play them for each other for hours, arguing about what belonged on a message to the cosmos and what didn't. There was no grand institutional machine behind it. There was a handful of people in living rooms, with a deadline bearing down on them, trying to decide what was worth saving from all of human experience. And the thing they kept coming back to, the thing they devoted most of the record to, was not science at all. It was music. Roughly 90 minutes of it, drawn from all over the planet and all across human history. 3/4 of the entire record. Given one chance to introduce the species, they spent most of the space on songs. Why? Ferris later explained part of the thinking. He wanted to include the great mathematical composers, Bach and Beethoven and Mozart, precisely because their music has a kind of structure, a mathematical logic, that an alien intelligence might be able to perceive even if everything else about it was alien to them. To a mind that has never had ears, a Bach fugue might still register as something ordered and deliberate, a pattern that could only have been built on purpose. So they put 3 pieces of Bach on the record and 2 of Beethoven. They reasoned that if anything could survive translation across an unbridgeable gap, it might be the underlying mathematics of the music. But they didn't stop at the math. They reached across the whole world. There's a Peruvian wedding song, a girl's initiation song from Central Africa, panpipes from the Solomon Islands, percussion from Senegal, a raga sung by an Indian classical vocalist, a Chinese piece for an instrument called the guqin, more than 2,000 years old, with a name that translates to something like flowing streams. And from Bulgaria, a haunting folk song called Izlel G. Dilio Hajdun, sung by a woman named Valya Balkanska, a voice so strange and powerful that it sounds, even to human ears, like it's coming from somewhere very far away. And then there are the choices that weren't about mathematics or geography at all. They were about feeling. At that very first listening session, Ferris suggested a recording by a blues musician named Blind Willie Johnson. The piece is called Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground. There are almost no words in it. Johnson, who had been blinded as a child and who spent much of his life singing on street corners for spare change, doesn't really sing the song so much as hum and moan over the sound of a slide guitar. It is one of the loneliest pieces of music ever recorded by a human being. And the team understood that this loneliness, this sound of one soul reaching out into the dark for something it cannot see, was exactly the right thing to send into the actual dark. A man who never saw the stars in his life is now traveling between them, his loneliness chosen to speak for all of ours. There's Chuck Berry too, playing Johnny B. Good, suggested early on by Drew Yin. Rock and roll, launched into the literal cosmos. It later became a famous joke, the idea of aliens receiving a request to send more Chuck Berry. But the joke quietly misses what they were doing. They weren't sending information. They were sending joy. They were sending the proof that this anxious, frightened species also knows how to celebrate, how to make a sound purely for the pleasure of being alive. And there's one song that almost made it and didn't, and the reason why tells you something about us. Sagan wanted to include the Beatles. Specifically, Here Comes the Sun, which is about as hopeful and warm a piece of music as our species has ever produced, and which carries, in its very title, the image of the star these probes were leaving behind. The story that's always told is that the Beatles themselves liked the idea, but the rights to the song were held by their record label, and the label said no. So one of the most beloved songs ever written about the sun was kept off humanity's message to the stars over a copyright dispute. There is something painfully human about that, too. The last piece of music on the record is Beethoven again. The Cavatina, from one of his late string quartets, written when he was almost completely deaf, near the end of his life, reaching for something he could no longer even hear. It's slow and aching and full of a kind of acceptance, and it was placed, deliberately, as the final track. The closing statement. After all the joy and all the noise, the last thing humanity says on the record is a piece of music written by a dying man who could not hear it, about making peace with the end. As a choice for the closing note of a message meant to outlast us, it's almost too perfect. It's worth stopping for a second on what that means. All of human music, every song ever sung, every tradition built over tens of thousands of years on every continent, and they had room for roughly 27 pieces. Think about everything that got left off. Entire civilizations of music, entire instruments, entire emotions, gone, because the disc only held 90 minutes and the deadline was 6 weeks away. Every choice they made to include something was also a choice to leave 1,000 other things in silence. They argued about it in those living rooms. People fought for the pieces that meant something to them. And in the end, they had to let almost all of it go, knowing that the tiny fraction they kept would be, for any listener out there, the entire musical output of the human race. That's the cruelty buried in the project. To speak for everyone, you have to leave almost everyone out. Then there are the voices. On one section of the record are spoken greetings in 55 languages, from ancient tongues that almost no one alive can still speak, all the way to the most widely spoken languages on Earth. The plan had originally been to use formal greetings from United Nations delegates, but that fell through, so most of them were recorded in a hurry by people from the language departments at Cornell University. The greetings are short. Some are formal and careful. Some are oddly casual, the kind of thing you'd say to a neighbor over a fence. There's a greeting in ancient Sumerian, a language that died out thousands of years ago, sitting right next to modern voices. And one of them, in English, is the voice of a small child, Sagan's own young son, just saying hello from the children of Earth. There's something almost reckless about that. A 6-year-old, speaking for a planet of billions, to a listener that may not exist, who may not arrive for 1 billion years. There were 2 formal messages added as well, printed rather than spoken, one from the Secretary General of the United Nations and one from the President of the United States, Jimmy Carter. Carter's message is brief, and it has stayed with people for decades. He described the record as a gift from a small and distant world, a token of our sounds and our science and our feelings. And he wrote something that lands harder every year that passes. That we were a species attempting to survive our own time, so that we might one day live into theirs. We were not announcing that we'd made it. We were admitting to the universe that we weren't sure we would. And tucked in among the human voices is one that isn't human at all: the greetings of whales. The team included whale song as a kind of second language of Earth, an acknowledgement that we are not the only ones here who sing, not the only ones who send long, complex signals out into a darkness, hoping something answers. But the part of the record that haunts me most is the sound essay. The 12 minutes that and Drew Yin put together to answer the question, what does it actually sound like to be alive on this world? It is not a tidy postcard. It's wind and rain and surf breaking on a shore. It's thunder. It's the call of a humpback whale, the chirp of crickets, frogs at night, birds, a chimpanzee, the footsteps of a person walking, the bark of a dog, the rumble of a passing train, a heartbeat, laughter, the soft sound of a mother and her child, the sound of a kiss. It's fire and tools and the machines we built. It is, in 12 minutes, the texture of an entire living planet, assembled by someone who clearly understood that you don't explain Earth to a stranger. You let them hear it. And here's something that almost didn't survive the process. Drew Yin had wanted the sound essay to be honest. She suggested including sounds of human conflict, of marching and protest, the harder truths about what we are, alongside the laughter and the birdsong. NASA said no. The agency wanted the portrait to be hopeful, uncomplicated, the version of humanity you'd put in a brochure. So the darker sounds were left off, which means the Earth that's drifting through interstellar space is, in a sense, a slightly idealized one. We sent the version of ourselves we wished we were. And maybe that, too, says something true about us. That even when we tried to be honest, we couldn't quite resist editing. It's inside this sound essay that Drew Yin did something no one had ever done before. Something so personal, it almost shouldn't be on a spacecraft at all. To understand it, you need to know what was happening in her life during those 6 weeks. Drew Yin and Sagan had been friends and colleagues, nothing more. But while they worked on the record together, something shifted. The story she has told is that one day, away from each other, she picked up a phone, called him about a piece of Chinese music she'd found for the record, and somewhere in that conversation, without either of them planning it, the two of them understood that they were in love and were going to spend their lives together. By the end of that single call, they were, in effect, engaged. She has described hanging up the phone and screaming out loud with joy, calling it a discovery, like something out of science. And it happened almost exactly as the first Voyager was about to leave the Earth. Now, Drew Yin had an idea for the sound essay that was, even by the standards of this project, a little wild. The technology to record a person's brainwaves, to hook them to an EEG and capture the electrical patterns of their thoughts, was very new at the time. And she wondered, what if a civilization advanced enough to find this spacecraft, advanced enough to retrieve it and decode it, was also advanced enough to read those brainwave patterns and somehow reconstruct what the person had been thinking? It was a long shot built on a long shot. But the whole record was a long shot. So she volunteered her own mind. She was wired up to the EEG. She had prepared a kind of mental script, a list of things to meditate on while the machine recorded her. The history of our planet, the way civilization had grown, the problems and dangers facing a species that builds technology faster than wisdom. The big, serious subjects you'd want represented if you were the consciousness chosen to speak for all of humanity. And she thought about those things. But she was also, by her own account, only a couple of days removed from the most overwhelming emotional event of her life. And so, woven through the meditation on history and danger and the fate of the world, were her thoughts about Sagan, about what it felt like to have just fallen in love. They recorded about an hour of her brain. Then they compressed it down to roughly a minute and pressed it into the gold. So when people ask what the most human thing on the golden record is, this is my answer. It isn't Bach. It isn't the photograph of a sunset or the diagram of a hydrogen atom. It's an hour in the life of one specific person's mind. A woman in 1977, thinking about the history of the world and about a man she had just realized she loved, now traveling silently through the space between the stars, on the chance, however small, that something out there might one day decode her and feel, for an instant, what she felt. It's a love letter with no envelope, addressed to no one, that will outlive the people who wrote it, the project that created it, and very possibly the entire human species. And there's a detail that makes it almost too poetic to be real. Druyan and Sagan married a few years later. They stayed together until his death in the winter of 1996. He's been gone for nearly 30 years now. But the recording of her thinking about loving him, made before they'd even told anyone it was happening, is still out there, intact, carried by the very machine he fought to give a voice. In a literal sense, a piece of their love story is now the farthest traveled human artifact in existence, and it will keep traveling long after every other trace of either of them is gone. We haven't even gotten to the pictures yet, because the record doesn't only carry sound. Encoded into its grooves, in a format that has to be decoded and reassembled into images, are 116 photographs. And the choice of what to show is its own quiet drama. They didn't start with anything beautiful. The very first image is a simple circle, a calibration image, there so that whoever decodes the record can check that they're reconstructing the pictures correctly. If their version of that first image isn't a clean circle, they know something's wrong and they can adjust. It's a small act of humility built right into the front of the message. We assumed, correctly, that getting it right would be hard, so we gave them a way to check their work. From there, the images build up a careful introduction, definitions from mathematics and physics, so that everything afterward has a foundation, diagrams of our solar system, showing which planet we live on. The structure of DNA, the molecule that all life on Earth is written in, drawings of human anatomy, of how we reproduce, of a developing child growing in the womb. And then, gradually, the images soften and the everyday begins. This is the part that gets to people. There's a photograph of a woman in a supermarket holding fruit because the team wanted to show how we eat and where our food comes from. There's a man drinking, a person licking an ice cream cone, a family portrait, an old man with a dog and flowers, a grandmother. There are children in a classroom, an athlete in mid-motion, a diver. There are houses and a city street and a highway, the Taj Mahal and the Golden Gate Bridge, a page of a book, a violin beside sheet music. There's a sunset. There's the Earth seen from space, and a single human silhouette against the sky. Taken together, these aren't the images of a civilization showing off its weapons or its power. They're the images of a species trying to say, here is what an ordinary day looks like for us. Here is what we love. Here is what it's like to be one of us, doing the small things, on the only home we've ever had. But even here, NASA flinched. The team had wanted to include a photograph of a nude man and woman standing together, simply to show, plainly and without shame, what a human being looks like. NASA refused to allow the actual photograph. So instead, the record carries a clean line drawing, a silhouette of a man and a pregnant woman, with the figure of the developing child shown inside her. We sent diagrams of our own bodies to the stars because we were too self-conscious to send a photograph. Once again, the most human thing about the record is the thing we wouldn't quite let ourselves do. And all of this, the sounds and the songs and the voices and the pictures, had to come with one more thing: instructions. Because none of it means anything if whoever finds it can't figure out how to play it. And that problem, the problem of explaining a phonograph record to a mind that has never seen Earth and shares no language with us at all, fell mostly to Frank Drake. His solution is engraved right onto the record's protective cover, in a kind of universal pictogram. There are diagrams showing how to spin the record and at what speed, with the time units defined using the fundamental physics of the hydrogen atom, the most common substance in the universe, as a clock that any advanced civilization should be able to recognize. There's a drawing of the stylus in its correct starting position. There are even instructions for reconstructing the images from the audio signal. It is, in effect, an instruction manual written without a single shared word, relying entirely on the assumption that physics is the same everywhere, that the laws governing a hydrogen atom here are the laws governing it on the far side of the galaxy. And then there's the map, not of streets or countries, a map of where we are. It shows the position of our sun relative to 14 pulsars, the spinning dead stars that flash with such precise and unique regularity that each one is like a lighthouse with its own signature rhythm. To anyone who can read it, that diagram is a set of cosmic coordinates, an address. It says, in the only language physics allows, here is the star we came from, here is how to find us, and here is roughly when we sent this. There's even a small built-in clock made of uranium, slowly decaying, so that whoever finds it can measure how much has decayed and work out how long the record has been traveling. This wasn't entirely the first time we'd tried. A few years earlier, 2 other probes called Pioneer had left Earth carrying a much simpler message. A small metal plaque etched with a drawing of a man and a woman, a diagram of our solar system, and an early version of that same pulsar map pointing back to our sun. The plaque was a single still image, a postcard. But it planted the idea, and when Sagan got the chance to do it again with Voyager, he and his team went much, much further. If the Pioneer plaque was a sentence, the golden record was meant to be a whole library, sound and music and images and the inside of a human mind, all of it crammed onto a single disc. They thought of everything. 6 weeks, $1,500, and they sat down and engineered a message meant to be understood across 1 billion years and an unknowable gulf of difference. One of the engineers later said he could personally guarantee the record would survive at least 1 billion years on its exposed side, and closer to 2 billion on the protected inner side. 2 billion years. That is roughly the amount of time complex life has existed on Earth at all. We made something designed to outlast the entire story of life on this planet, and we did it almost as an afterthought, in living rooms, on a shoestring. And when you really sit with what they made, you start to understand that the golden record was never really about the aliens. Sagan understood this better than anyone. The odds that one of these records is ever found are so vanishingly small that, for practical purposes, they're zero. The galaxy is almost incomprehensibly empty. These 2 probes will most likely drift for the rest of time without ever passing close to another world, let alone a world with someone on it who can listen. The record will spend eternity playing to no one, and the team knew that when they made it. So why do it? Why pour that much care, that much of yourself, into a message that will almost certainly never be heard? Because the act of making it changed the people making it. To decide what represents humanity, you have to ask what humanity is worth. To choose the sounds of Earth, you have to fall in love with the Earth a little. The golden record forced a handful of people, and through them all the rest of us, to look at our species from the outside and ask a question we almost never ask. If this is all anyone will ever know of us, is it enough? Are we proud of it? It's a mirror disguised as a message in a bottle, and the reflection it shows is surprisingly tender. We are a species that, given one shot to speak into the void, chose to send music and laughter and birdsong and the brainwaves of someone in love, and got too shy to send a photograph of our own bodies. Sagan spent the rest of his life turning that same idea over. He kept insisting that the point of looking outward was, in the end, to see ourselves more clearly. That a cosmos this vast and this indifferent should not make us feel small and worthless, but should make every human face, every kindness, every song, feel almost unbearably precious, precisely because it's so rare and so fragile and so brief. The golden record is that whole philosophy compressed onto a disc. It doesn't say we are the most important thing in the universe. It says we were here, we paid attention, and we thought it was worth recording. That's the thing that survives, not the machine. The machine is dying now, its instruments going dark one by one as its nuclear power slowly fades. But the record needs no power. It will still be out there, carrying that minute of a human mind in love, long after the spacecraft falls silent, long after the last person who built it is gone, long after the sun itself has changed beyond recognition. We made something gentle and hopeful and unbearably human, and then we threw it as far as we possibly could into the dark, just in case. There's one last thing worth sitting with, though, And it's the part that not everyone agrees was wise. We didn't only send a hello. On that cover, in that map of pulsars, we sent our exact location. We told the universe precisely where to find a small, warm, defenseless world full of life. Some of the brightest minds who came after Sagan have argued that this was a mistake, that announcing yourself to a cosmos you don't understand is not an act of friendship, but an act of recklessness. That the first rule of survival, for a young civilization that doesn't yet know what's out there, might be to stay very quiet, and that we may have already broken it twice and sent our address tumbling into the dark at a speed we can never call back. Whether they're right, and whether we should ever have spoken at all, is a question worth its own story. If you want to keep wandering out here in the dark with me, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.